Welcome, everybody, to Influential Conversations for Accountants podcast slash webinar, part three. We record this live, this 8-part series live in webinar with a live audience. And we also publish to YouTube and we publish into the podcast. And the purpose of this webinar series is one, to have a conversation about how accountants can be more influential in the marketplace. And of course, as both a preamble and a companion to our conference coming up in October, which we'll discuss briefly. This webinar is for accounting professionals, CPAs, enrolled agents, bookkeepers, QuickBooks Pro advisors, small business accounting advisors, etc., that are looking to improve their firm communication strategy, to have more influential conversations with their clients, looking to develop their team through richer and more meaningful conversations, and also looking to improve their personal communication skills so they can bring less anxiety to and from work in and their personal life. So that's the purpose of this podcast series. It's 8 monthly episodes. You are listening to episode number 3 out of 8. Episode number 4 will go live May 10th, second Friday of every month until we have our conference in October. Each episode will be 30 to 60 minutes long with myself, Hector Garcia, my brother Carlos, and or special guests like we have today, which we'll discuss who he is briefly. You can watch live in Zoom, and the series is 100% free, to encourage you to joining us in October in Hollywood, Florida, for our conference titled by the same name, Influential Conversations for Accountants. That being said, let's get started. Today's guest is a person I've admired for a very, very long time. His name is Blair Enns. He's an author and an advisor to creative entrepreneurs. He works with advertising firms, marketing firms, and his ethos comes from his very first book called The Win Without Pitching Manifesto, which I have here in my hand. Buy this book in Amazon for $20 to $30 in hardcover. You can also get it in Kindle, and you can also get it in audiobook format, depending on what you prefer. It's got 4.8 stars, over 2,000 reviews, and it's absolutely amazing. We'll talk about it briefly. We'll talk about some of the thinking that has evolved from this book, his other books, and stuff that's coming up in Blair's world. So there's also another book, which is actually more of like a system. I think calling it a book would actually not be the right thing. It's a system. It's in flip, what's it called? A binder format, and it's really meant for you to use as a transformational tool. It's called Pricing Creativity, which is a play in two things. One is creativity is one of the most intangible, difficult things to price. So how to price that, and also getting creative with pricing. I'm not sure if it was meant like that, but that's how I understood it, which I think is brilliant. And also Blair's blog called The Thinking, a section of the Win Without Pitching website. You want to check that out. That's in the slides. And lastly, the podcast, the Two Bobs podcast, subtitled Conversations in the Art of Creative Entrepreneurship with David C. Baker, another brilliant person in the industry, wrote, I believe, the latest 2 books. One is called The Business of Expertise, which I absolutely love. And the other one is called The Secret Trade Craft of Elite Advisors, also an amazing read. So, Blair, did I miscategorize any of your introduction there?
No, that was a lot of info, Hector, and you got it all exactly right. Thank you for that. I'm really happy to join you today.
Absolutely. So before we get started, Blair, Win Without Pitching Manifesto is an immensely successful book. And I don't know if you have millions of sales. I doubt it, because it's a very niche book, but it's very successful because almost every person that reads this book writes to you, talks about it. Our mutual friend, Chris Do, who was in our conference last year, was so smitten by the book that he actually did an entire 12-part series in Clubhouse during the pandemic. And I believe that has been one of the most significant pieces of thought leadership that Chris Do has done in combination with you. So first, I'd like to tell us, why is Win Without Pitching Manifesto so successful? What in the world is the pitch? And give us a little insight into your world.
Yeah, thanks. Why is it successful? So far, it's within the next few months, it will hit 100,000 copies, which is it's pretty good for a niche book. It's kind of it's gone beyond the niche it was written for. That's, one of the reasons why I'm here speaking to accountants, not for the first time. Why is it successful? So the pitch. So everybody knows what a sales pitch is, right? And you go into a meeting with a prospective client. I venture to guess that you go into pitch mode where you are transmitting and not receiving. That is that problem is even it's orders of magnitude greater. I mean, if you could measure it objectively in creative firms, because in a creative firm, and what I mean by that is an advertising agency or a design firm, and these are the firms that I grew up in professionally. In these firms, you are conditioned to actually give the product away for free. Solve the problem, solve the creative problem as proof of your ability to solve the problem. So the cost of sale in a creative firm is very high. And this idea of pitching for free, we won't get into the history of where it came from and why it continues to prevail. But I think when I came along in 2010 and published the manifesto, nobody in this market of ad agencies in particular, and also some design firms, nobody really believed that you could actually secure a new account, win the business without having to solve the problem as proof of your ability to solve the problem. The manifesto is really a yes, you can book. It's written to be an inspirational book. It's got 12 chapters, each of them a proclamation that we'll get into, I'm sure. And it was really, there's very little, here's how to in the book. I mean, there's a bit of it, but I really wrote that book. I was trying to incite a revolution. And I think I was somewhat successful. I'm happy with the impact it's had on the business, because a lot has changed in is it 14 years? I'm horrible at math. A lot has changed in the 14 years or so since that book has come out. What hasn't changed is annual sales keep increasing every year. So it started out slowly and it just keeps steadily building. So year 14 or year 13 of sales eclipsed every other previous year. And it's just a curve that just keeps going upward. So it's saying that there's still a need for this thinking in the marketplace.
This book is like fine wine, right? It gets better over time. So you were saying there's not a lot of how to, which is what most people look for. Like, how do I solve this problem? How do I change my practice? How do I, behave differently? What words do I say? How do I respond to the client's complaints or scope creep or whatever? Like a lot of us are looking for the how to, but the book fundamentally looks into what should your strategy be? Like, how should you think of yourself in terms of creating standards of work? So these standards of work that you impose on yourself, and what I mean by yourself, I just don't mean yourself, the individual, but yourself, your firm, right? You're going to have standards of work, and these standards of work are essentially going to present themselves on the quality of the work, and then the quality of the work eventually will speak for itself. So instead of you having to sell yourself and do all this extra work around selling yourself, like pitching, right? The quality of your work speaks volumes about what you do. And then you start attracting customers. You start pulling customers towards you instead of you trying to push your idea onto them. So that's how I see it. And I'll briefly go through the 12 proclamations. And if you're an accounting professional, you're watching and listening to this is actually written in such a way that is not industry specific. Like, you actually go through these 12 proclamations and you think about your practice, your business, or yourself if you're an individual, and you think, what if I had those proclamations? What if I said that out loud? And what if I acted as if every single one of these things were the absolute truth about how I should manage my business? So I'll pick Blair's brain about maybe 2 or 3 of them, but these are the proclamations. We will specialize. We will replace conversation. We will replace presentations with conversations. We will diagnose before we prescribe. Hat tip to the medical industry there. We will rethink what it means to sell. We will do with words what we used to do with paper. We will be selective. We will build expertise rapidly. We will solve problems before we are paid. We will address issues of money early. We will refuse to work at a loss. We will charge more. We will hold our heads up high. These are the 12 proclamations, 12 things that you need to say. And if you do say them and you believe them and you act upon them, your business could be transformed. So Blair, maybe break down 2 or 3 of those for us.
Well, the foundational one is the first one, the first proclamation of we will specialize. And when I wrote that book in 2010, there was still kind of a dearth of specialism going on in the creative firms, in the creative industry. There's a reason for that, but it's not specific to the creative industry, but creativity is effectively the ability to see. It's not the ability to write or draw, at least based on the definition that I'm using that was written by a scholar on creativity. So if you think of this, it's the ability to bring a novel perspective to a problem. Then if that's your superpower, thinking about a problem differently, then you will be drawn to problems that you have not previously solved. So your personal superpower and your personal interest aligns to this need for variety. You're always drawn to a problem you haven't previously solved, and it conflicts with your business's need for you to focus. Because everybody understands that, broad expertise is an oxymoron. And if you want to get deeper, if you want to deepen your knowledge on something, you want to become more expert on something, the most practical way to do it, and effectively the only real way to do it, unless you're like a genius polymath, the only way to do it is to narrow your focus. You narrow the set of problems that you are staring at every day, that you're solving, and you start to see the patterns. You go deeper and deeper into that. So it starts with specialization. So if you take, and I don't profess to know the accounting profession well, but I do, for the last few years, I've thought I should buy an accounting firm, because I work with accountants in our business. I'm in Canada. We work worldwide. The majority of our business is in the US. So we have American accountants and Canadian accountants, and I've worked with multiple accountants. And I'm just struck by how poorly positioned they are and how they price. It drives me crazy how they price, but we can come back to that. So if you're a generalist, if you're just you hang out your shingle and you say CPA, you've got an accounting problem, we can solve it for you. A lot of it might just be tax returns. Some of it might be a lot more specialized than that. Then just think of the number of competitors that you have. You have all kinds of different competitors. And it's not until you narrow your focus and you start to specialize in something, it might be accounting for small business owners. And we need to come back to this because it's a bit of a big topic. And there is a danger in specializing too early in your career. But at some point, it makes to narrow your focus. And I would say I just finished writing a piece on this. It hasn't been published yet. And I haven't decided whether I'm going to publish it or not. But I'm basically saying to my market, creative people, but I also identify accountants, financial planners, and engineers. I say design is now too expensive. Accounting is now too expensive. If you define what you do by your discipline, if you say, I am an accountant, I am a designer, then you are in competition with offshore labor and AI. And you're in a race to the bottom. What you do is going to zero. AI can already do most tax returns. It's in a race to the bottom. But if you take that discipline, you have this accounting discipline, this accounting skill certification, so that's a discipline, and you apply it to a more narrow set of problems, either narrow the problem set or narrow the market, the organizations, people or organizations for whom you solve those problems, or a combination of both. Now you can start to use AI. You can even start to use offshore labor. You can use these tools that are commodifying your discipline to your advantage, and you can start to create real value and charge a lot more money. So that's kind of a modern update on this idea of we will specialize. If you are if you define what you do by your discipline, I am an accountant, rather than I'm somebody who solves these types of problems and I happen to be an accountant and there are accounting components that we will take care of, then you're in trouble. And I think, you know, you and I can have a conversation about this, Hector, and people can pose questions or comment on that if anybody wants to push back on it. But that's kind of a modern update on the first proclamation of we will specialize. And if you don't gain an advantage, change the power dynamics in the buy-sell relationship by vastly reducing the number of direct competitors through specialization. If you don't do that, then all of the 11 subsequent proclamations, they're a lot harder to do.
That's a great point. And I want to give you some insight into, and I know you heard from every industry reply back, but Blair, you don't understand. Our industry is different. Like everybody has the same answer. So I'm going to put the you don't understand our industry is different hat for a second, just to tell you what our challenge is. Okay. Our challenge is our entire industry has chosen not to be specialists. So customers are accustomed to the CPAs that do everything. They're accustomed to, hey, can you do my personal tax return? Yes. Can you do my S Corp or my business? Yes. Can you do my brother's little company? Yes. Can you do my church's return? Yes. Can you do my grandfather's state tax return? Yes. The challenge that we've had is that we've created an environment where we, as our brand, accountants, CPAs, bookkeepers, we want our client to trust us for everything related to money, accounting, and tax, because we felt that that was the way to have the most amount of opportunities and the most amount of business. And the only way to grow our business really was to say yes to as many people that have a checkbook as possible. Now, you're proposing to us something that many thought leaders in our industries, in conferences, in podcasts is proposing to us, which is pick a specialty, specialize, and the riches are in the niches, et cetera, et cetera. However, for a lot of us, it's difficult to figure out how to get started with that exactly with a firm that already manages and does multiple things, with already a lifestyle where we draw satisfaction from the fun of solving a brand new problem that we've never seen before. In the horizon, we see two potential problems. One is we don't know how to go from broad to narrow in our existing firms. And two, we're worried about getting bored. So those two things are happening at the same time. Even if we intellectually understand that there's more profitability in the end, and we all do, and accountants, we understand profitability more than anyone else. Even when we accept that, we have trouble getting the kickstart because of those two issues. So you mind addressing them?
Yeah, none at all. So it's not a requirement to specialize. You just, so if you're not specialized, you have a sales and marketing problem, right? You have a new client problem. If you don't have a new client problem, then there's no problem to solve, right? You're fine. And one thing about accounting is, I imagine it's like financial planning in that it's a relationship business. Once you are in the relationship, a lot of those relationships go on for a very long time. So the bigger threat to those relationships is actually the cost of your services going down through offshore labor and AI. But in terms of attracting new clients, if you don't have a problem, then you don't have to specialize. The goal is not to specialize as narrow as possible. It's to be positioned as broadly as practical. So how tight do you need to get to be differentiated so that you can build your practice? If the people who are listening to and watching this, if they've already built a substantial practice, and their focus isn't on growing the practice through the acquisition of new clients, then they don't really have to worry about it, at least in the short term. They do have to keep an eye on the cost of their services, some of the key services going to zero. That's the looming threat. Boredom, yeah, creative people have the same issue with boredom. And it's also not, specializing is not about saying no to everything. It's really about the work that you pursue and that you're trying to attract. In a relationship-oriented business, let's say, I'll give you an example. So I live in a small town in the middle of nowhere in remote mountain village in Canada. Like, it's not even a town, it's a village, less than 1,000 people. The woman who cuts my hair here, she used to live in the big city of 10,000 people an hour away. And when I talked to her about what I do, and we talked about specialization, she told me the story of when she launched her hairstylist practice. She advertised herself as specializing in curly hair. And she said she was immediately swamped. She just filled all of her capacity immediately, because I've never seen a hairstylist claim to specialize in a certain type of hair. And my wife has curly hair and she goes to her, etc. But what happens is the initial influx of business, she's differentiated herself in the market, allows her to build a practice early. But then all of the referrals happen. All of these relatives and friends who don't have curly hair look at the value proposition and go, well, if you can cut curly hair, you can cut straight hair. So at some point when she was at capacity, which was pretty quick, she dropped the claim of specialization. And I have another example of that in the financial services space. And these are both kind of relationship-oriented businesses that strike me as similar to accounting firms. So if you're if you're young in your business or early in the business, or you do have a growth problem, a lack of growth through a lack of new clients, try putting out there accounting firm, and then in smaller type specializing in X. Now, if you're doing marketing, now you have a distinct marketing message. So that's how I would have you think about it.
I also think about Google searches. Like, what are the probabilities? Let's say you're in LA. What are the probabilities that somebody goes to Google and types CPA in LA, right? And they'll find you. If you actually understand a little bit about SEO and the way you game the whole search engine world, it would probably cost you $500,000 over a lifetime of work to get to the point where somebody searches CPA in LA and you show up. Where if somebody, and by the way, on top of that, let's say you show up and a bunch of other people show up, all these top 5 are also competing with price, because people are calling all 5 to quote the price, because there's many of them. But if they search CPA in LA for Japanese expats / double taxation issues, right? They're only going to find the one person that decided to specialize on that, to make their entire website about that, to write blog articles about that. Social media is called the Jap expat CPA or whatever. Like, they build an entire brand around that. And yes, you will have a lot less clients, but it's possible and extremely realistic that the less clients you get could pay more than the broad clients that you're taking, because a Japanese expat with double taxation problems, talking to the one person that specializes on that, is more willing to pay $10,000 to just get it done right by the expert than gamble with somebody else. And I think what some of the things that people do with non-specializers is they make a mental calculation in their head that goes, if I go with a non-specialist, then I have to make up the risk I'm taking with price. But when I go with a specialist, I'll pay more for taking less risk. So the specialist de-risks the transaction. And that's the part that doesn't get discussed enough. And this is one of these squishy mental calculations that customers make that they might not necessarily say out loud, but it does happen through their decision making. So there's an inherent price premium that you will be searching by being the one and only that people were able to find as the expert about that.
Yeah, and you shouldn't even try to strive for one and only. I think if it's a market of one, then you're probably too tight. But you vastly reduce the number of direct competitors. You've used the word price premium a couple of times. You think about the definition of the word premium. It's got 2 definitions. One is an amount above an ordinary or a standard price. That's a premium. And another definition is It's the amount you pay monthly on your insurance policy, right? They're the same thing. So just think about this. You pay a price premium as a form of insurance. So almost 20 years ago, when I needed to find a cross-border accountant who dealt with Canadian and US taxation, and I searched Google, there was really only one person who came up, and we still use that person. So that, to illustrate your point. Yeah, price premium. People pay more for the insurance. Because I could hire a generalist to do this stuff that hasn't done it before. Most of them wouldn't take it. But imagine the expert who said, "I've never done that before, but yeah, I'll do it." Many years ago, when I moved to this small village, we had one doctor. His name was Doc Olson, believe it or not, old Doc Olson. And I went to him. I had a kidney stone, and I said, "I also need a vasectomy. And can you refer me to a urologist?" And he said, "Yeah, I will refer you." And he said, "I used to do these. I could probably do it." And then he said, "No, I probably shouldn't." And then he said, "No, I could probably do it." And just imagine the confidence that he did not instill in me, even though he was seasoned. It wasn't the thing that he did every time. My wife just came back from a dental specialist, a consultation for a procedure that is probably going to be a little bit painful. And the guy said, "I do 500 of these a year." Okay, you're the person you do this procedure 500 times a year. I will pay. And then she did the math on the price and how much money this is a dentist making well over $1 million a year. So that's price premium. She pays the premium because she wants the person who's going to get it done right. And he builds a fancy new house as a result.
And we can accept the premise that doing 500 of those specific things, it's probably more boring than doing a whole bunch of new different cases. But also
not boring spending that money, though.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point I want to make. But also, what's not boring is getting better at it every single time. Two, you being the one that other professionals could look after to kind of like mentor them and help them, and you become a leader, a thought leader in the profession, being recognized as best in class in that area. And also, when you're best in class in something and something innovative is happening in that world and they need a consultant or a face or a partner, they're going to say, "You know what? We're building this new machine that does that procedure in half the time. And who best to partner with than the one person that has done it 500 times?" So you also want to think about your evolution as a professional. Like, do you want to retire or die doing the same thing you're doing now? No. But the best way to evolve is to stand out. And the best way to stand out is to be best in class. And the only way to be best in class is to build, as you have it here on, I believe is number 7, build expertise rapidly. And you kind of have to do the same thing over and over, like the 10,000 hour rule, right? I forgot, that was Malcolm Gladwell, that you have to do something 10,000 hours to become an expert at it.
Yeah, and this fear of boredom, we need to speak about it because it is grossly overstated. It's been proven repeatedly across numerous studies. Human beings are horrible predictors of what they will and will not like. So you think of, here's the metaphor that I use. You're standing in a room full of doors, and I did this with Chris Do on one of his podcasts. And being a generalist, you want to walk through every door. Every door represents a different problem with a different type of client. And I'm standing behind you and I'm saying, "No, you need to pick one door, walk through it, and never look back." And you think on the other side of one door is you will die from boredom, because you think if you can only spend the rest of your career in that one room, it's just solving the same problem over and over again. It's going to bore the hell out of you. But that's not what's on the other side of that door. What's on the other side of that door is more doors. You just can't see them from where you are. So this guy who does 500 procedures a year, I'll bet you in some ways they're all similar. And then there are these outliers that really push him and are the source of him deepening his expertise. And I'll bet the problems are fascinating, and he runs up against the edge of his skill set into kind of the zone known as the flow state, where well, I'm challenged, but I feel competent. I feel like I'm at the height of my abilities. That's that flow state. That's what we all kind of seek in everything that we do. And yeah, if you're doing the same thing over and over again, repetitive tasks, you don't get to that flow state. If you're always doing something new you haven't done before, you're seriously stressing yourself. You don't get to that flow state. You do get to it. You do get to it as an expert who's kind of pushing the boundaries of your expertise, getting deeper and deeper. I think Carlos has joined us.
Yeah, Carlos joined. Carlos actually in Europe, so he says I'm gonna sneak in. He probably forgot to unmute when he logged in. Absolutely, Blair. And we'll end this conversation with. There's a story I want to tell you. It's very, very, very quick. I've told this before. People may have heard me discussing this before. My friend came to my house the other day, and he opened the sliding door, and he heard all sorts of squeaks. And he said, "Oh man, you gotta call my sliding door guy. He's great." Now, when he said that, I heard handyman. I mean, I didn't hear sliding door guy. Like it wouldn't occur to me that there isn't a thing as a sliding door guy. So I called, I called Juan and I said, "Hey man, I have an issue with Mauricio told me to call you. I have an issue with my sliding door. Can you fix it?" He's like, "All right, most of the problems can be fixed for $175. I have a lot of the parts with me. Once I get there, I'll let you know if there'll be more. Are you okay with that?" I mean, he was addressing the issue with money early on, almost like, "Listen, I don't even want to talk to you if you don't think $175 will work." And I was like, "Okay, fine." And then so he comes in, he looks at the sliding door, and he said, "Yeah, I'll get it done for you. Here's my Zelle. Pay me $175 or whatever." And I just had to pay him right there and then. I just kind of trusted him, really. So he went in there, he took the door out, replaced the wheels, put the door back in. The sliding door was like, it was just so satisfying to finally get my sliding door back without the squeaks. And the guy goes, "Try it." And I go, "Amazing." And in that moment, I said, "This is the best handyman I've ever seen in my entire life." The guy comes with equipment. He's ready. He told me the price up front. He fixed it in like literally, I'm not lying to you, 9 minutes. And I said, "Hey man, I'm definitely going to use you. I need help with this, need help with this." He's like, "I only fix sliding doors." And I was like, "Wait, you make a living just fixing sliding doors?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Okay, tell me a little bit about that."
That's amazing.
He tells me, I tell him, "Tell me a little bit about that." And the guy shows me his calendar, and he had 17 more sliding doors to fix that day. So in the day, because he was already like wrapping up and leaving. Like that's all he does. He's a sliding door guy, and that's it. And I gotta tell you, every time a friend comes over and they're checking out my house, I go, "The first thing I want you to try that sliding door." Like I show off the sliding door, and I'm so proud. And I have referred Juan, the sliding door guy, to every single person that I know, and I've never referred any of my other handymans that I ever had, because that to me was just so amazing. And that's how you stand out. Like we gotta be the sliding door guy of our industry, and charge $175 for 9 minutes worth of work. And next, now that's a bit in direct contrast of the whole relationship concept. Of course, Juan wasn't trying to build a relationship with me. He has a relationship with sliding doors. He has a relationship with his craft. He has a relationship with probably every single day he wakes up, he goes, "I'm going to do it under 8 minutes. I'm going to do it under 7 minutes." So I'm sure he figured out a way to keep himself excited about doing the same thing, but doing it so damn well that customers are just impressed by what he does.
So the entire audience, being accountants, has already done the math on 17 times 175. What I really like about what he did is once he diagnosed it, he didn't even tell you what the problem is. I can fix. He's already told you most of these things cost $175. You say, okay. He diagnoses it. It's the same problem that comes up probably 90% of the time. And he's got all the different wheels in the van. He says, "I can fix it. It's $175. You pay him. He's done in 10 minutes. So he's eliminated the conversation where after 10 minutes, he says, "Hey, it's $175. And you say, "What? It only took you 10 minutes. Good for him for getting the money up front. That's fantastic.
Right. I as a value pricing guy, of course, I didn't challenge the whole pricing premise, but I could totally see myself 10 years ago without understanding value pricing and completely going bonkers about paying $175 for the 10 minutes. The point is that all he really, and you really think, if you look at the work, all he did was remove the door, clean the guide, and replace the wheels. This is like what, $5 to $10 worth of materials. The value was knowing how to do it quickly, saying it with confidence, having a fixed price, and being recommended by someone else that says, you got to call my sliding door guy. That is the brand. I mean, it maybe that happened by accident, but that is the brand. The brand is, I will get your sliding door fixed and you will be blown away. And he never presented it that way.
Yeah.
It happened through the word of mouth.
Yeah, that's incredible. I'm going to use that story. If I may, I'll attribute it to you.
No problem. And so we'll move on from that. And I wanted to ask you, Blair, so we'll write a manifesto for us, for your firm, for you individually. We'll use your book as inspiration. Maybe we'll bastardize all 12 of them and just kind of reword it. Maybe we'll grab 2 or 3 that we like. Once the manifesto is written and we have convinced ourselves and we have convinced our team, is there a public version of this? Like, how do we now let the world know that we work under these standards and these minimums? And like, how do we externalize this?
Yeah, so it in my world, it starts with the point of view. You have to articulate a point of view or a perspective. So we can describe your focus as your discipline for a certain market. So what do you do and who do you do it for? And then you look at who else has the same discipline and market. Accounting, for anybody who needs accounting. There are a lot of competitors. And so the first way to set yourself apart is through narrowing that focus, either the discipline or the market, more correctly, like focus on a specific set of problems for a specific client type. And then the second level of differentiate. So now you've eliminated, now instead of 1,000 direct competitors, maybe you have 20 direct competitors in your geographical market. Now, how do you further differentiate yourself from those 20? Well, it's through your perspective, your point of view, your overarching belief on how this discipline for market should be done. So once you arrive at a perspective, and I'm fortunate, I tripped over one. It's right there in the name of the business in the book, this idea that you can win business without having to pitch for free. So that's the perspective. Then write a manifesto on it. And the manifesto doesn't have to be a 24,000 word book. It can be a 450 word blog post. And then once you write the manifesto, you nail it to the church door the way Martin Luther nailed the 96 Theses of the Protestant Reformation. So what does that mean? That means put it on your website somewhere prominently and link to it and reference it from time to time. And I think that's enough for most people. And for some people, some firms, maybe the manifesto is maybe there's enough there to write a book. Maybe it's just a blog post. Maybe it's a YouTube video, whatever it is. Just get it out into the public. And the other work that you're doing, if you're creating any thought leadership, if you're putting any information out there in the world for to draw people to you, then link back to that manifesto. And what you're trying to do here with that perspective and the articulation of that perspective in the manifesto is you're trying to attract clients who are ideologically aligned. So in my primary target market of creative firms, if you don't think free pitching is a problem, then you're not going to be drawn to us. If you think free pitching is a problem and nothing can be done about it, or you, for whatever reason, you can't change your ways, you're not going to be drawn to it. So your perspective should be somewhat polarizing. It's not fair to say it should be like really polarizing. The need for polarization, I'm fond of saying, is a function of competition density. So if you're undifferentiated and you've got all kinds of direct competitors and there aren't enough customers and it's a bloodbath fighting for those potential clients, then you need to be somewhat polarizing in your perspective. And off the top of my head, I can't think of what a perspective for an accountant would be. I know my financial advisor, I don't know that he would articulate this, but I think of his ideology as paying any tax is criminal. He's offended if I or any of his clients pay taxes. And he's not advocating that we do anything illegal. He's just into all kinds of elaborate structures to get your tax bill to zero. So I would say that's kind of his ideology. Now, I would just ask the listener, do you have a point of view that you think sets you apart from most other accountants who also do what you do, serving the market that you serve? You're muted, Hector.
I want to share with something with you briefly there. I think it wasn't a direct inspiration, but I believe you had a lot of influence on this. A couple of years ago, I got tired of answering the question, I need a CPA. How much do you charge? Like, I just felt it was just a lot of waste of time for both sides. So what I did is I wrote I said open letter to new clients. I published it on LinkedIn. I have it on my website. When anybody asks me the questions, I'm going to say, hey, read the open letter first, then we'll talk. On the open letter, I say, why not CPA accounting services are the same, the fact that I only do a few of them and not all of them, the fact that you have to pay a diagnosis fee up front just to have the initial conversation and for us to know what we can do for them, the fact that we have a specific niche, which is QuickBooks related inventory, e-commerce, and manufacturing workflows. That's the specialization that I have, the type of work that we typically do, the type of work that we normally don't do, and addressing the concept of why I'm not going to give them an hourly rate. So I think you had a lot of influence on that, and that completely transformed and changed how I felt about having that conversation up front. Instead of having to sell on the idea that, hey, you got to pay me for a diagnostic, and then they'll go, why do I have to pay for a diagnostic if nobody else does? I go, just read the open letter and then get back to me. And I believe that, one, the level of confidence that you exude by doing that, it's really valuable. Number two, it gives the client homework. I've done my homework. I spent the past 25 years becoming the best at what I do. Do some homework, client, and figure out if you want to work with me. So I want to thank you and Ron Baker and many of the people that I've followed over the years for giving me the confidence to doing something like that. And the reason why I'm saying that is because maybe it doesn't look like 12 bullet points in your website that says, these are my proclamations. Maybe it just simply just looks like this. Hey, Mr. Customer, you want to work with us? This is what we do. This is how we do it. This is a process. This is the entry fee. And this is likely what you'll get out of just the initial conversation, even if we don't work together. And make people go through the exercise of learning that first. I don't have a book, so I can't be like you, Blair, where you say, I really won't talk to you if you haven't read my book yet. Okay, and I get that position because your book is who you are. It's your thinking, and it's much easier to have a conversation about what you can do for them after they've gone through the basic elements of your book, because the conversation is much more advanced conversation. Just like I don't take any more clients that haven't seen one of my YouTube videos. Why? Because it would be such a waste of time for me to like sell myself and who I am and what I'm good at, okay, before having somebody already see it firsthand by watching my video. So the point is, the manifesto doesn't look exactly like the way you have it laid out in the book. It's just basically setting the rules of engagement.
I love it. Absolutely love it. It does all the heavy lifting. And for your open letter, my book, and that book in particular, there's just a marked difference between somebody who reaches out to you who has been exposed to your thinking, your point of view, and somebody who has not, right? So I can imagine that you get inquiries from people, hey, email me your rates. I'm looking for an accountant. And you probably go, oh, not another one of these. And you send them back and say, read this. And if you want to talk after that, let me know. And it's this separator. It does a lot of the heavy work, your philosophy, your specialism, all of these things. And it's the same with me. Every once in a while, we get some, I haven't had it in a while because that book's been out for 14 years and I have other books and podcasts for 7 years, etc. But every once in a while, I get like somebody who's like, hey, we're looking for a consultant. You're one of three. can you respond to this RFP? Something silly like that. And it's clear that I'm just a name on a list, and they don't actually know anything about us.
That's awesome. Yeah, absolutely right. We're aligned there. Question: 12 proclamations and win without pitching. Again, amazing framework for building a specialized practice. Is there a 13th proclamation? It's been 14 years. It's been what, 14 years you said? Is there something, like, if you could go back and add a 13th item, would you add one?
Yeah, I don't think I would. First of all, I don't know which. I would keep it at 12. I don't know which one I would take away. I really like the question, but I'm surprised at how much I still like that book 14 years later. One of the things, we've already spoken to this, there isn't a lot of here's how to. So the books that I'm writing now, Pricing Creativity, is really the here's how to follow up for the money proclamations, 8 through 12, really, 8 through 11, really, where we talk about it's really about money, getting paid, loosely about pricing. So that's a here's how to, and as you say, it's kind of a working book. It's a manual it's in that form because I want you to have it on your shelf, and I want you to pull it off from time to time and reference it. And the book that I've finished now and is out in September, and I won't say the name of it yet, but it is really the here's how to follow up to the manifesto. It's written in the same tone of voice, but it's quite detailed. It gives away our entire model for selling. So what you do when, how you hold yourself, what tools you use, and includes some guidance on pricing as well. So is there 13th proclamation? No, but it would be the 13th proclamation is everything I've done that comes after that book, I guess. Here's how to.
Yeah. So a couple of things I want to add. In the conversation we had prior to hitting record, you told me the same thing. I won't tell you the name of the book, but the general theme was that we, the professionals, we are two avatars. We are the expert, the technical expert at the particular thing that we have trained all of our lives for. And then there's our branding selves, the salesperson inside of us that is promoting that craft. And some firms have that completely separated. They got the salespeople and the branding people, and they have the production people and the experts. But I believe that in accounting, so much of us are both the ones selling the firm, selling the services, and then doing them. So I believe that much you can give away, that's the theme of the book, is the separation between, our expert self and our salesperson self.
Yeah. So the first two books were written for the creative individual and the creative firm. They have found much, much broader audiences. And this third book is written for that broader audience. So it would include accountants. It's anybody who sees themselves as an expert, advisor, or practitioner first, and a salesperson second. So if your second job is selling, if you have to sell to be able to do what you love to do, your core profession, then this book is for you. Because most people whose second job is sales generally don't like it, don't think they're very good at it. And so this book is written for those people. And you're alluding to this idea of the expert you versus salesperson you. There's a post I wrote. You can find it on winwithoutpitching.com. I think it's called The Dichotomy of the Expert Salesperson. And David Baker and I did a Two Bobs podcast recording on it by the same title, where I say, there's this, here are all the attributes of expert you. Here's how you show up in the sale. You're disciplined, you're empathetic, you're listening to the client. You're all of these great, you could just list all of the qualities of an expert. You just think of your relationship with your doctor or your lawyer, how they behave. You have those same attributes in the engagement. Now list the attributes of salesperson you. Do you show up the same way? And really the list, and I list attributes of both versions of you in this blog post I just referenced. they're almost mirror opposites. So like, why is that? Why have some of you have been trained that way, but mostly you've intuited that this is how you should sell because this is how you yourself have been sold. And the big message in the book is lose salesperson you, lose them altogether. We have a model that allows expert you to show up the way expert you should show up and sell in a way that's intuitive to experts, where you don't have to step out of expert you and become salesperson you, where you go into convince mode. You try to talk people into things. You're like trying to prove yourself, etc. You can drop all of that. You have to know what to do instead, but that's what that book's about. It's really about that. It's really for the expert who has to sell, doesn't really like it or doesn't think they're good at it or is struggling with it. And I think the goal of the book is to free them of this idea that you have to be this other version of you. You don't.
I love that. And I promise my audience that as soon as that book comes out, well, first of all, I'll buy it and read it and then try to get Blair back on to do a deep dive on that and maybe figure out is there an accounting firm specialized adaptation to the teachings of that book. So we'll have the discussion later on. So with the time that we have left, I wanted to discuss Pricing Creativity book for a second, just some of the lessons that we've learned from it. So you say that this is the how-to, or your first iteration of a how-to for creative professionals on how to price. And there's two concepts I want to discuss. I want to discuss the holistic concept, let's call it the mindset concept, and let's talk about, and then the other concept is the mechanics. So the holistic concept that you have is that the power of the sale is a function of desire. And you have this formula, which is P equals DB divided by D. And then I'll have you quickly define that. And then maybe give us one technique for pricing or crafting options and setting up the low offer and the high offer.
Sure. So P equals DB over D. I wish I had a win without pitching coffee cup here because we printed on the back of the coffee cup. It stands for your power in the sale. P for power is a function of your desirability, DB being greater than your desire. So your desirability, how badly the client wants or needs to work with you or an engagement with you versus your desire for the client, how badly you need it. Otherwise stated, whoever wants it the most has the least power in the buy-sell relationship. I got a phone call or a FaceTime from a friend 2 days ago. She was lying on the carpet, just had this gut punch from this deal that did not happen. She was just like, she just kept saying gut punch, and she was just lying down, FaceTiming me from the floor. And it's just a deal that didn't happen. It was a big deal, but what was the problem? She was so emotionally invested in the outcome. And when it didn't happen, she was just absolutely devastated. Now, do you think you can behave like expert you in that moment? No, you go into salesperson you go into convince mode. You become a version of yourself that you don't actually like because you want it so bad. So we just have to pay attention to the power dynamics. And are we behaving, ask ourselves, are we behaving like a needy vendor, or are we behaving like kind of this vaunted expert? And you don't want to overplay that idea, but let's not show up as needy vendors who go into convince mode. And there was a second part you had asked me, Hector.
Second part is when crafting pricing options, we talked about giving people three choices. Usually people have a very tough time coming up with a low and the high option. Once the low and the high are set, I think the middle's pretty easy to build. I think some people start by building the middle option and then figuring out what the low and the high is. Do you have any quick 3-minute version of like, how do we think about the low, the high, and the middle when it comes to crafting a price options?
Set the high first. So you're in a conversation with a client about, here's what my needs are. What is it going to look like? You say, well, it could be as high as X. And then stop. And X should be a number that scares even you. And a little bit of silence is good. And when the client goes, there's no way, then you can say, okay, like that's on the high end. And that's you can get into comprehensive example why it's so high. You can say we have if you're packaging up your services, you can say packages start at Y, like low end of the spectrum. And then so I don't think this applies in an accounting profession. Like in a creative firm, you would ask the client, was there a budget you were hoping that I could hit? Is there a number that you wanted me to try to work with? So let's say I anchor at $100,000 and the client chokes. And let's say they walk $100,000. There's no way I'd pay 100 for that. Well, if we could deliver these outcomes, what would you pay? Let's say they say, well, maybe at the most 50. Okay, 50. So I can work with that. Now on the low end, was there a number that you said you didn't have a budget, but was there a number you were hoping to hit? Yeah, I was hoping to spend 10,000 or less. Okay, so now we have a range between 10 and 50. I'll go away and I'll come back with some solutions. And they'll be priced in that range of 50 on the high end and 10 on the low end. So generally, you can either use the client's stated budget as a low end and say, well, here's what we can do for this. Or you can set the low end of the range with your kind of standard base package. And that's probably more applicable for this audience.
Yeah. And I think the way I would quickly apply it is, sometimes we think of our services as just one solution. Like the only solution is to prepare a tax return. So we already have a predetermined amount of time, resources, whatever that it takes our firm to do it. So we have a target pricing range ourselves for that. But if you can get a little bit more creative and go, well, maybe I'm not doing your tax return. Maybe I'm just talking about the tax return that you can do on your own. Maybe I'm giving you a lesson on how taxes work. Maybe I'm just laying out a strategy. Maybe I'm doing the tax return and adding a guarantee that if you get audited, it will include the auditing. So the reality is, I think most of the time we are so mired and focused on the services that we have provided before that when we think of pricing, we're like, okay, this is not very elastic. How would we take a client's price range and back into it? And I think what you're trying to tell us is, hey, if you first understand and present the enormity of the problem, and then the client acknowledges what the problem is, and then they give you what is worth to them to make that problem go away, then you'll come back into whether or not you could provide a solution that can help them get there within that price range. So is that kind of what you're telling us?
Yeah, and I think in your profession, I think you should have packaged services. The prices can change depending on the size of the client or other variables that might be a surrogate for the value to be created here. But you would have a basic package. This is the cheapest we can do. And let's just use tax returns. I just do the return and it's X. And the middle package is so how can you add value? X plus consultation. You have questions? Like I have questions for my accountant, or my wife and business partner does, and we call the accountant and like we get the questions answered, and then a bill shows up and it's like, what? Oh, we always pay it, but it's annoying as hell. We never know, like they don't articulate to us, like at no point have they ever articulated this is how the relationship works. We just get these bills in the mail. There's an opportunity for them to extract more money from us to pay for like a larger sum of money up front or even monthly, or just some ongoing consultation where we don't feel guilty about calling and they don't feel guilty about sending the invoice. And then the anchor option is, you think of the anchor option, the most expensive one would be customized, something quite elaborate, customized to that client situation. So think of it as basic, enhanced, and then customized. That's a good way to think of 3 options for the accounting profession.
That's a perfect way to end it. Blair, thank you so much. We're on top of the hour. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you. I'm going to speak in behalf of the entire profession. And yes, I have given myself the title and the authority to do that. So in behalf of the entire profession, we love what you got to say. We would love to learn more about what you could provide for us. And then we'll see you next time. So I know you got to log off. Thank you very much, Blair. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Hector. Bye-bye.
Okay, so Blair stepping out. I just want to do a couple of things here. So one, I was hoping that maybe we could talk a little bit about a couple of episodes from his podcast. So I'll just mention them really quick. One is called Just Stop Talking. This one just came out. And honestly, I think it's one of the best podcast episodes I have ever heard. Go listen to it. And it talks about why we talk so much, why we oversell, why we feel the need to fill the void. or a blank space where you're just allowing the customer to think about the solutions is called Just Stop Talking. Check it out, the Two Bubs podcast. He's got another awesome episode called something about pro bono. I call it strategic pro bono, which is in what situations pro bono makes sense and how can pro bono be a net good thing that your firm does, and a whole bunch of episodes on scope creep and having conversations about scope creep. Blair Enns is absolutely fantastic. He coined a concept called the inefficiency principle, which basically means that you can either be innovative or efficient, but the two things are pinned against each other, right? Being efficient is not being innovative. That means doing it the only way you know how to do it and try to do it as quick as possible. And being innovative means experiment, do it different, look for a different solution, think outside the box, stop and think. And as accountants, we focus way too much on efficiency, way too little in innovation. And until we understand that these two things are pinned against each other and we are comfortable with being innovative, even at the peril of being inefficient, then we're going to evolve, and then we're going to evolve ourselves into the next level. So if you're not already signed up to come to our conference in Hollywood, Florida, it's called the Reframe Conference, called Influential Conversations for Accountants. I take a little bit from Blair, I take a little bit from Ron Baker, from all the people that I admire that I have learned over the years. And we built the conference around this, about how to have better, more effective conversations with our clients, employees, co-workers, software companies, whatever. The original date that we had set was the third week of October. We're going through some date changes. The dates might change to October 16th to 19th. It's not official yet, but you will get an email if you already signed up for the conference for that official change. The conference ticket is $1,800. There are 4 coupon codes. One expires April, the other one May, June, and July. Because we had this date change, we had to redo the coupon codes. So you can sign up for this conference for now if you're available either October 16th to 19th or October 24th to 26th, the original dates. Sign up for the conference and we'll let you know very, very soon what those dates are. www.reframe2024.com. I'll give you my personal guarantee. It will be the best conference you'll ever go to. www.reframe2024.com. Thank you very much, guys, and we'll see you next month for episode 4 of the Influential Conversations for Accountants mini-series. Goodbye.